Good morning, everybody. My name is Simone Panigada. I am the president of the Tethys Research Institute, which is a small NGO based in Italy to study whales and dolphins in the Mediterranean Sea. And I am the chair of the scientific committee of ACOBAMS, an international agreement for conservation of cetaceans in the Black Sea, Mediterranean Sea, and adjacent Atlantic waters. I will be talking about monitoring and different survey strategies. More in detail, I will describe some monitoring techniques like satellite telemetry, aerial surveys, visual surveys, acoustic surveys, and I will present you a case study which was conducted last summer in the whole Mediterranean Sea through ACOBAMS. And then I will provide you some information on long-term project. And you will see that a multidisciplinary approach is usually very helpful in collecting robust and strong data, and that usually it's better to have an international approach rather than a national one, since the dolphins and the whales we are studying move quite intensively. This is the first slide of the telemetry study. You see the different colors correspond to different whales. 8 fin whales were equipped with satellite transmitters in the Pelagos Sanctuary in September 2012, while 5 fin whales were equipped in the Strait of Sicily around the island of Lampedusa in March 2013 and 2015. Different models were applied to describe fine-scale habitat use and to identify foraging areas and transiting areas. This is the result of the Bayesian models. As you can see, these are the whales tagged in the northern Mediterranean around the Pelagos Sanctuary and the Gulf of Lion in September 2012. In yellow, you see animals engaged in feeding. Ours is area restricted search, and it's a behavior associated to feeding, while the blue dots indicate whales that are transiting. As you can see, most of the whales spent most of their time feeding either in the Ligurian Sea between the island of Corsica and the mainland of Italy and France, or around the Gulf of Lion and the area between main coast of Spain and the Balearic Islands. A few whales, which you can see, for example, this one going south towards Sardinia, was transiting quite a lot and then stopped for feeding in the east part of Sardinia. These are the whales that were equipped in the Strait of Sicily. These are behavior of a few whales, and you see a lot of yellow dots, meaning that this area in the winter, we are in between March and April. Every year, whales spend a few weeks here for feeding purposes, and as you can see, there is a lot of yellow over there. At some point, the whale decided to move, to leave the area, and they went straight north. One lost its transmitter between Tunisia and Sardinia, while the other one went all the way to the center of the Pelagos Sanctuary in the Ligurian Sea. She stopped north of Corsica for feeding purposes for a few days, and then moved west before the tag detached. In this slide, you see feeding habitats. In yellow, you see the percentage of habitat which is favorable for feeding, and this is March 2015, and as you can see, there is a lot of activity down south of Sicily in the Strait of Sicily between Tunisia and the mainland, while there is not much evidence of feeding in the northern part. This is an animation. If it works, now you see the whales in the southern of the slide, and as you can see, the waves move around the foraging habitat. As the whale move around, the foraging habitat changes. Right now it's still fairly rich in the south, and as you can see now, the south becomes poorer and the northern part becomes very favorable for feeding. And the whales actually follow this pattern quite precisely and reach an area where the feeding is more abundant. The reason to do this kind of work is to overlap high density and movement of whales with traffic. And as you can see in this slide, this is a yearly average of traffic, and the area where the whales were crossing, namely the Strait of Sicily and the Pelago Sanctuary, are really impacted by high levels of traffic. This is one of the most highly impacted areas in the world, and these whales are spending days feeding, concentrating on feeding, and so the risk of collision with the ship is very high, and this is how we can assess how to identify high-risk area where to apply mitigation measures. To conclude these preliminary results, some whales undertook mid to long-term distance migration, crossing some of the world's busiest maritime routes, and we were able to identify areas where animals were engaging in feeding behavior. The Mediterranean fin whale constitute an isolated subpopulation which is listed as vulnerable under the IUCN Red List, and ship strikes represent the main cause of human-induced mortality. The identification of critical habitats is therefore very important and essential to channel appropriate conservation effort, and these results suggest how a coordinated and dynamic management scheme is needed to protect Mediterranean fin whales. And this is going to be used to define appropriate protected areas within the regional convention, such as the CMS and the agreement ACOBAMS, or SPAMI under the Barcelona Convention, or EPSA under the Convention of Biological Diversity, or either IMAS, important marine mammal areas, under the IUCN framework. And we will be discussing about all these agreements in a later presentation. Another topic of my presentation deals with abundance, and we start with a few definitions. Why do we study abundance? Because we want to know the density and the abundance of a species in a specific area, and then we can use the information to test prediction and hypothesis, and to assess the status for conservation and management. Abundance is the number of individuals. It can be in a population or in a specific area. The density then is the number of individuals divided by the area. And then we need to decide whether our estimate is biased, and this is accuracy, and measure the uncertainty about our estimate, and this is the precision. And is usually expressed in 95% confidence interval or coefficient of variation. How do we determine abundance? We can do counting, census, but this is not very easy. For example, if we study whales and dolphins in the sea, then we need to estimate, extrapolate a sample of data to the whole population or the whole area. And when we do an estimation, this involves making assumptions about the representativeness of a sample data, effectiveness of data collection methods, and whether data conform to requirements of analysis and to the methodology we are applying. And we need to make sure that we are aware that assumptions may be violated, and we need to find ways to accomplish this. One of the best methodology to do this is line transect sampling. This provides an estimate of abundance in a defined area in a defined period of time. For example, how many dolphins are there in the Pelago Sanctuary. Data are collected by searching for animals along predetermined transect lines to give an estimate of sample density, which is then extrapolated to the entire study area, and we need to make sure that data are representative of the area. The first steps in a new survey are define your area, specify the time period, and design the transect to give a representative sample. The area is then estimated. We search along predetermined transect lines for animals, and when we encounter an animal or a group of animals, we need to identify the species, determine group size, and measure the perpendicular distance from the animal or from the group of animals and the track line. Then we continue searching along transect lines. At the end, we have the number of animals which is encountered. We know the length of the total transect, and we need to estimate the width of the strip searched in order to make an estimate of the population and the density. We can conduct a survey on a ship or on a plane. We need to consider different issues, whether the survey is coastal, whether the coastline is very fragmented, which species are we assessing, what is the endurance of the plane, is there any airport or airports available close to the study area, what are the prevalent weather conditions, what kind of equipment we want to use. We need to consider seasickness and psychology. You can get seasick and don't be afraid of planes, or you can never get seasick in very rough sea, but be very afraid of planes, which can, of course, create an issue if you do an aerial survey. And then we need to consider cost, which is a very important part of our equation. Daily effort may change very much. On the left, we see an airplane track for 1 day, 750 nautical miles. That was done in July 2009. On the right, we see a whole survey with a ship, which was less than the previous one, 677 nautical miles in 8 days in August 2008. So as you can see, the effort can change a lot, and the coverage can change a lot. With the survey, you can have a very high coverage, like in the case on the left. With the ship-based survey, you need to approximate more, and you will have a less robust result. An example is the ACOBAM survey initiative, which is the first cetaceans macro-regional survey, which was conducted last year in July and August 2018 from the ACOBAM's agreement. This was the first cetacean survey covering the whole Mediterranean Sea, and this year, in a couple of months, we will be doing the Black Sea. This came out of the common will of ACOBAM scientific partners and countries. It was made possible through the strategy developed by the Secretariat, and thanks to the ACOBAM Scientific Committee, the supporting countries, the Permanent Secretariat, the MAVA Foundation, who provided funding, and Prince Albert II Foundation, who also provided funding. It was designed to support ACOBAM's purpose and key missions: reduce threats to cetaceans, in particular by improving our knowledge on these animals, promote cooperation between the riparian countries, and reinforce capacity of national scientists, which are all very, very important points. To develop a coherent monitoring system for the cetaceans in the Mediterranean and the Black Sea, based on objective, robust, and comparable data, with a view to improving the conservation status of these species and their habitats through appropriate management for the good status of the marine and coastal environments in the area of the study. We wanted to harmonize and standardize methods and protocols, determination of a regional state of reference of the abundance and distribution of cetaceans, development of a cetacean management information system for the macro-region, in this case including the whole Mediterranean, and development of conservation recommendation to improve existing national measures. The driving force was to establish a baseline for cetacean population abundance and distribution, and to assess and to ensure long-term monitoring of these endangered species, to strengthen international cooperation and synergies between the countries of the region, and to establish a transnational conservation approach, to establish an expert group composed of trained scientists and to create a regional task force, and to provide essential support to the countries to meet their international and regional commitments. And by this I mean ecosystem approach process of the Barcelona Convention, the European Union directives, Habitat and Marine Strategy Framework Directives, CBD Aichi targets, action plans of ACOBAMs, and the UN Sustainable Development Goals, and the commitment for ocean conservation. And we will discuss all of this in a different presentation later on. The decision was to focus on aerial surveys, and in order to get the results, we used 8 planes, more than 40 observers, 70,000 kilometers on effort, 800 hours of flights. The line transect distance sampling was used we approached with a multi-species protocol, meaning that we were collecting data on cetaceans, but also on other large vertebrate species, like large fish, swordfish, tunas, mola, sunfish, turtles, sharks. We made regional training workshop, and we have training for security and health and safety. We also had a vessel component to make sure that the area was surveyed with vessels as well, and the methodology could be combined. We had 2 boats, Song of the Whale and the Naftilos. Then 2 boats will be surveying in Egypt. 1 boat was surveying in the Lebanon coast, and we will have 1 boat surveying of the Syrian coast. 1 team leader per boat, plus 8 to 12 observers. We had more than 60 observers. Again, the same methodology was applied, but the difference is that with the plane, we were having also only visual observation. With the boats, we will have passive acoustic monitoring, allowing to collect acoustic data for most of the Mediterranean Sea. These are the transects from the aerial surveys. As you can see here, in different colors are the different planes that were engaged. And as you can see, most of the area of the Mediterranean has been covered. There are some areas like north of Libya, north of Egypt, north of Morocco, where we will not allowed to fly with our planes, and therefore you don't see any trucks. These areas have been or will be covered by boat in order to make sure that we didn't have any empty area in the Mediterranean Sea. Just a brief presentation of the results. These are just the small size cetaceans, mainly dolphins, striped dolphins, common dolphins, and bottlenose dolphins in different colors. And as you can see, they were fairly distributed around the Mediterranean Sea, with a higher density in the western part, a very high density of bottlenose dolphins, for example, in the Strait of Sicily and in the Adriatic Sea. And as we move towards the east, the number of sightings decreases quite systematically. As I said, we did also a boat-based survey, and this is the Song of the Whale tracks, which were doing the western part, the area north of Libya, and the Hellenic Trench of Greece. And here you see the acoustic effort in green, the acoustic and visual effort in dark green, and only the visual effort in blue. In red you see when we were with animals, and you get some information on the effort that was covered by the survey. The main species targeted by acoustic were sperm whales, and here every red dot means that the acoustic were detecting sperm whales. This doesn't mean that these are all different animals, because most of the animals were recorded more than once, but it gives you a nice indication of the distribution of sperm whales, which is pretty much consistent throughout the western part and the Hellenic Trench, which is a very important area for sperm whales. The data analysis is ongoing as we speak. We want to provide the most robust abundance and density estimates for conservation and management, and we want to increase the analytical capacity of scientists throughout the Acobans region. And this will be done and achieved through sub-regional analysis workshop, which will be done in late 2019 and 2020. Density and abundance will be estimated through both design-based and model-based analysis. We will estimate the density and abundance for each block or group of blocks, and we will prepare density maps for each study area with a clear indication of aggregation of cetaceans and areas of high use, to be used, of course, for conservation purposes. Moving to the last section of my presentation, long-term projects and how important are long-term. This is a case study called the Cetacean Sanctuary Research, carried out by my institute, the Tethys Research Institute, over the last 20 more years. The study area is within the Pelago Sanctuary, northwest of France, of Corsica, between Italy and France. This is the research effort. We had about 250,000 kilometers, almost 2,500 days spent at sea between 1990 and 2018. And these are the number of sightings. more than 4,000 sightings of striped dolphins, followed by 1,100 fin whales, 400 and more sperm whales, 187 rhesus dolphins, 55 pilot whales, 74 beaked whale, 78 bottlenose dolphins, and only 4 common dolphins, which are very rare in the study area. This is the effort over the years, and the pie chart with the different species, which are the mostly observed species in the study area. These are the number of sightings, and as you can see how they are distributed. To the left top we have striped dolphins, on the right top we have fin whales, on the left bottom we have sperm whales, and you can see they tend to be closer to shore along the slope area. And on the right we have rhesus dolphins and beaked whales, Cuvier beaked whales. We wanted to do a little bit of modeling, and as you can see, you see fin whale model prediction in the very top left corner. On the right you see sperm whale model prediction and how they tend to use the study area. Then we have on the left bottom Cuvier beaked whales, and on the right we have rhesus dolphins. It's very important to do this kind of exercises because when you do conservation you want to know where the dolphins and the whales are seen and how they use the habitat and where they are expected to be observed. And this is where modeling helps a lot. We also do photo identification studies, and we have a catalog of 505 fin whales, 157 sperm whales, more than 270 rhesus dolphins, 132 bottlenose dolphin, and also some beaked whales and some pilot whales. These data are used for site fidelity, habitat use, and also to estimate abundance through mark recapture analysis. In conclusion, I am presenting a few selected references, and you can find all these papers in the portal on Canvas. Thank you very much.